So that's an ideal time frame for you to fight in November. KAMARU, is that a possibility?
It's a possibility tonight.
Let's do it tonight. Let's do it right now. Let's go right now. Let's go right now.
Although we don't always like to admit it, we as MMA fans can't help but love seeing two people who genuinely dislike each other get the chance to settle their differences inside the cage. And in a sport as competitive as mixed martial arts, it's not so difficult for feuds to develop between fellow fighters. While most fighters manage to keep their emotions under control, there have been a few situations where the bad blood couldn't help but get out of hand. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at some of the biggest and most heated grudge matches in UFC history. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 of the biggest grudge matches in UFC history. Number 10. Ronda Rousey vs MIESHA TATE 2. Right off the bat, Ronda Rousey and MIESHA TATE had a genuine dislike for one another, which was evident before their first match in 2012. This was mainly due to the fact that MIESHA felt disrespected that Ronda was getting a title shot so early in her career. They engaged in some back and forth trash talking during the build up to their first fight in Strikeforce, which Ronda ultimately won by an armbar. Fast forward to 2013, and Ronda was the UFC's women's bantamweight champion, looking to make her next title defense against Kat Zingano. But when Kat suffered a knee injury, MIESHA came in to replace her, which Ronda was less than thrilled about. The two competed as opposing coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, but never seemed to be able to get along. The show was filled with several heated moments between the pair, and anticipation for their rematch continued to grow until they finally faced off at UFC 168. Although MIESHA TATE put up a good fight, and even managed to make it as far as round 3, Rousey ended up winning the rematch in a similar fashion, as she finished Tate by armbar once again to retain her title. Despite the win, Ronda Rousey seemed unable to bury the hatchet after refusing to shake hands with MIESHA. Number 9. Urijah Faber vs Dominick Cruz 3. The rivalry between these two dates all the way back to 2007, when Cruz suffered his first career loss at the hands of Urijah Faber at WEC 26. The loss sparked an immediate dislike between them, and planted the seed of a rivalry that would span years. Following the loss, Cruz then dropped down to the bantamweight division, winning 8 fights in a row while claiming the bantamweight title. Once they migrated over to the UFC, Cruz and Faber faced off in a rematch at UFC 132, with Cruz now acting as the defending champion. Ultimately, Dominick Cruz won by unanimous decision. But as far as Urijah was concerned, their business was far from settled. With each fighter holding a victory over the other fighter, it was only natural that one more fight had to take place. And while a few injuries may have delayed the third fight, it was only a matter of time before they stepped into the cage to settle the score one last time. For 5 years, the bad blood between Cruz and Faber lived on. That was until they were finally scheduled for a trilogy fight at UFC 199. While the lead up to their fight saw a lot of entertaining trash talk, the fight itself ultimately saw Cruz win by decision to settle their rivalry. Number 8. Chuck Liddell vs Tito Ortiz 2. One of the longest standing grudges can be traced all the way back to 2002 between Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz. Before there was any bad blood, Chuck and Tito actually started out as friends and training partners. But their relationship began to grow sour, as Chuck became a contender in the division where Tito was champion. Tito Ortiz refused to fight Chuck, which prompted Chuck to accuse Tito of ducking him, and a war of words soon followed. After several setbacks, the two finally faced off at UFC 47, which Chuck Liddell won by TKO in the first round. Fast forward 2.5 years, and Chuck Liddell had claimed the light heavyweight title, whilst Tito Ortiz had solidified himself as #1 contender. The two were finally set to collide once again at UFC 66. And it was clear that the bitterness for one another still remained. Although the second fight lasted longer than the first, the outcome proved to be the same, with Chuck Liddell finishing Tito Ortiz by knockout in the third round. Number 7. Colby Covington vs KAMARU Usman. Colby Covington is well known for being one of the most controversial fighters in the UFC, and his road to the UFC title has seen him anger just about every welterweight in his division, especially KAMARU Usman. Although the two had exchanged several heated words in the past, and even nearly came to blows in the buffet line, things really began to escalate after Colby defeated Robbie Lawler and then proceeded to call out Usman in his post-fight speech. From there, the two became involved in a very intense exchange. And it was clear the only way to settle their extreme dislike for one another was inside the cage. While negotiations to get the bout finalised proved to be a bit difficult at first, the fight was eventually announced in the coming months and was the headline event of UFC 245. During the build-up, Colby remained his outspoken self, insulting USMAN in every way possible. But KAMARU didn't take the bait and waited till fight night to let his fists do the talking. What resulted was an incredibly close fight. But in the end, USMAN was able to secure a knockout finish late into the final round, in turn closing the book on their heated rivalry. Number 6. Jon Jones vs Daniel Cormier 2. Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier are undoubtedly two of the best fighters on the planet. Yet, for whatever reason, the two just can't seem to ever get along. The dislike between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier began almost immediately after Jones jokingly stated that he could take down the Olympic silver medalist in an MMA fight, which rubbed Cormier up the wrong way. From there, tensions escalated enormously, which resulted in countless verbal and even physical altercations in the lead up to their fight at UFC 182. And once Jones defeated Cormier, the bad blood got even worse. Due to a hit and run incident, Jones was stripped of his title, with Cormier winning the vacant title in his absence and proceeding to call out Jones in his post-fight interview. Once Jones was eligible for a return, they were scheduled to compete in a rematch at UFC 200, but Jones was removed last minute after a failed drug test. Cormier then continued to rule over the light heavyweight division, and throughout all this, the bad blood continued to grow between Jones and Cormier, as well as the anticipation for their rematch, which was eventually held at UFC 214. It was a fight that was years in the making, and one that ended in Jones finishing Cormier by TKO. Well, that is until the win was overturned after Jones tested positive yet again. So, unfortunately, we didn't get to see the ending that we'd hoped for. Although a third fight remains unlikely, I suppose anything is possible. Number 5. TJ Dillashaw vs Cody Garbrandt 1. Dillashaw and Garbrandt actually started out as teammates, both operating under Urijah Faber at Team Alpha Male. But after TJ Dillashaw left the team, Garbrandt saw it as a betrayal. Both Urijah Faber and Cody Garbrandt held nothing back, disparaging TJ on social media and accusing him of being a traitor. Fast forward a few years, and the two were set to face off in the co-main event of UFC 217, with Cody acting as defending champion. From there, a war of words quickly began, with Garbrandt even releasing a video of him knocking down TJ during training. And things got even more out of hand on The Ultimate Fighter, where the two opposing coaches became involved in several heated altercations, one of which saw Cody grab TJ by the neck. Once they squared off at UFC 217, TJ defeated Cody by TKO in round 2, in turn taking back his bantamweight title. It was no doubt a satisfying victory for TJ, but even with the finish, it still didn't bring their rivalry to an end, so they decided to run it back 1 year later, which resulted in TJ finishing Cody once again, this time in the first round. Number 4. Rashad Evans vs Rampage Jackson. By far, one of the biggest feuds in UFC history came between Rashad Evans and Rampage Jackson. The bad blood began when Rampage defeated Keith Jardine at UFC 96, where Evans proceeded to step into the octagon shortly after to challenge Rampage. The two immediately squared off and started exchanging some heated words, and were eventually set to headline UFC 114, and things only got worse from there. That same intensity carried over to their time as coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, where the two became involved in several unpleasant altercations, with one such occasion coming very close to becoming physical. So by the time the fight took place, fans were on the edge of their seats, eager to see who would come out on top. Unfortunately, the fight itself turned out to be a bit lackluster, with Evans winning by decision in a somewhat dull affair. And although the fight itself didn't live up to expectations, the fans were certainly hyped during the build-up, and the event itself did very well in terms of pay-per-view numbers. Number 3. Brock Lesnar vs Frank Mir 2. The bad blood between Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir kicked off almost immediately following their first fight at UFC 81, after Mir submitted Lesnar with a heel hook in his UFC debut. Following the fight, Mir held nothing back, insulting Brock Lesnar for tapping out during the fight. The comments definitely angered Lesnar, which he used as fuel to motivate him in the eventual rematch. Just 1 year later, Lesnar went on to seize the undisputed heavyweight title from Randy Couture, while Frank Mir had gone on to win the interim heavyweight title at UFC 92. The stars aligned and the two were once again scheduled to compete in the main event of UFC 100, this time for the undisputed title. During the fight, Lesnar earned his revenge, stopping Mir by second round TKO to avenge his first loss. Although he had earned the win, Lesnar made it clear during his post-fight speech that the grudge was far from settled. Number 2. Anderson Silva vs Chael Sonnen 2. Easily one of the biggest fights in UFC history was the second meeting between Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva at UFC 148. In 2010, Sonnen had spent quite some time campaigning for a fight against the reigning champion Anderson Silva, and eventually he got his wish, with the two paired up to fight at UFC 117. The lead up to their first fight saw Chael Sonnen unleash a tirade of insults onto Anderson, the likes of which no one had ever seen before. Surprisingly, Sonnen dominated Silva for 4.5 rounds, before getting caught in a triangle choke late into the 5th to lose the match. Despite the loss, the rivalry was far from over, and after defeating Brian Stann at UFC 136, Sonnen proceeded to call out Silva for a rematch, with his wish eventually being granted in 2012. Once again, the lead up to their fight at UFC 148 didn't disappoint, as Sonnen held nothing back, insulting both Anderson Silva as well as his home country of Brazil. The verbal warfare continued all the way up to their fight at UFC 148, but unfortunately, Sonnen was unable to back up his talk. In the end, he lost the fight by TKO, and the rivalry was put to rest. Number 1. Conor McGregor vs Khabib Nurmagomedov. There are very few rivalries that have gotten quite as out of hand as Conor McGregor vs Khabib Nurmagomedov. Nurmagomedov is a fighter who is often praised for his calm and respectful demeanour. But in the case of Conor McGregor, Khabib couldn't help but express his extreme dislike for the Irishman. The feud between the two spans back at least as far as UFC 205. But things seriously escalated during the week of UFC 223, where Conor showed up with a group of friends and proceeded to wreak havoc. This was in retaliation for an incident that involved Khabib and Conor's teammate just a few days prior. The incident ultimately led to McGregor's arrest, but it seemed that nothing could keep these two apart. So once McGregor was cleared to return, Khabib was more than willing to oblige, meeting him at UFC 229 to settle the beef. During the build-up to the fight, McGregor was in full form, as he appeared as outspoken as ever. The fight ended with Khabib submitting Conor in round 4, with a chaotic brawl ensuing shortly after. And while the fight may be over, the bad blood continues to live on. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.
Never have a doubt, do you like me now? Am I good enough now? Should I get more loud? Till you hear the fucking sound? Oh no, I'm losing my shit again, having to fit again. Man, I'm forgetting when I used to have some friends. I used to play pretend, we all grow up and then hating my phone and trends. I'm about to blow my head, nobody knows I'm dead. There I'm a ghost instead, think that I'm close, I get straight comatose in bed. Try to go slow with breath, without my nose and head. Heart doesn't go the trend, faster it goes.